Good afternoon, folks. Welcome back to the Phil Tourney podcast. Got a very, very special guest today, former NSA type guy, National Security Agency. He's a Vietnam vet. He knows what he's talking about. I trust him explicitly, or he wouldn't be on. His name is Michael Gaddy. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Your bio, start back to Vietnam.
Yes, I was involved in the oxymoronic field of military intelligence, and was after I left Vietnam, I was sent to the National Security Agency, and I didn't understand why in the beginning, because most of us had not heard about NSA at that time, but we did know, we'd seen it in our communications back and forth. And so I went to the agency, got there in mid-1967, and then was assigned to a FLIR 9 site, or Flare 9. People called it by different sites. And the acronym that was used in the military was Elephant Cage. Now, folks, they are no longer in existence, no longer in use, but there is one still standing. And if you would like to acquaint yourself with that, I would suggest there is a YouTube called The Last Elephant Cage. Now, those antennas were spread across the globe, and they were huge. They covered as much as 40 acres, an antenna that covered 40 acres. And we picked up, meaning we as the NSA, we picked up every form of communication that was out there. Voice, electronic, Morse code, whatever it was picked up. And it was also used in coordination with RC-130s in the Air Force and also with E-21s in the Navy. And our primary function when I was first involved was triangulation. When someone would suddenly come up in a communication that we hadn't heard before, we would shoot RDF, radio directional finding, from 3 different directions so we could pinpoint where they were actually located. Because many times, as you know, in war, they use deception as much as possible so that people will not know where they were from. But my career there, and I was at a FLIR 9 site on the day that the USS Liberty was attacked. And we sat and listened to the entire thing with our blood curdling. We're angry. We wanted to do something. It's just natural when you know that we've got fellow Americans under fire. And we had linguists who were very proficient in Russian, the different languages, Hebrew, Muslim languages, Farsi, whatever. We had those linguists on site. And so we were hearing what was happening firsthand from our fellow NSA operatives. So it was very alarming to us, and we knew exactly what was going on. And then, just like you guys were approached by Admiral Kidd, we were approached later and, in essence, said, okay, everything you heard didn't happen. So how do you want to proceed from there, my friend?
Well, let me ask a little bit more that
Please do.
How they went ahead and tried to silence you. Was it a threat, or just don't do it? Or you knew by then that the Israelis had attacked our ship and you had your own opinion about that? Let's get into that a little bit. And your fellow spies there in the Elephant, they were pretty ticked off too, I'm sure, to hear that an American Navy spy ship is being attacked by a foreign government, which is Israel. And I just, there's been a lot of different people I've talked to, but not other people that were that far away and had that much knowledge about it. What do you think about, Mike, as for your fellow crewmates there?
Well, we knew, Phil. We knew right away because our Hebrew linguists were telling us that these pilots were confirming that they had seen that the USS Liberty was an American ship, and they were asking to re-ask the command authority they said, look, these are American. And they were told, proceed with your orders. Do as you are told. So that is what we knew from the very beginning, that even the pilots did not want to participate initially, but then they were ordered to do so. Now, the one thing we did not have communication with, and I'm not sure why, but we did not have communication or understanding of the attack boats, like the PT boats. We did not have, or at least I didn't know at that time, if we had communications with them. But we know that the pilots were fully aware that this was an American ship they were attacking. And that's why they asked for a confirmation of orders, not once, but twice. We heard that.
The pilots knew what they were doing and on an American ship, but they were following orders like everybody else, I guess. But how do individuals, pilots, or anybody for that matter, kill innocent Americans on the high seas and just do it over and over and over again like this? That was something we could never figure out. I haven't figured out to this day what type of people it takes to do that. I mean, that's about as bad as it gets. You know, we had nothing to fight back with. And they're strafing us and dropping napalm on us and doing everything they could to kill us. I mean, by the grace of God, we survived. But the Israeli pilots, these guys were in jet aircraft, Mystere Mirage jets, unmarked jet aircraft. And we didn't know who was attacking us, as you well know, Mike. But what really got you interested in the USS Liberty?
Well, the first thing is that the first thing that flashed through my mind, Phil, and I'll be totally candid with you, the first thing that flashed through my mind is, well, if my government's going to allow this to happen to these Americans in the Navy, hell, they don't care if they let it happen to me. And that was my first reaction. And it was the reaction of the majority of the people at our facility at that time. I mean, I can remember exchanging just looks with the other people, especially the linguists who were going back and forth, and everybody had that bewildered look in their face, like, what the dickens is going on here? Why is this being allowed? And then, of course, later years of study before I left the No Such Agency, as we called it, before I left them, I began to, just out of my own curiosity, to try to put things together. And why was this allowed to happen? Why was John McCain's father put in the position of making sure it was negative throughout the Navy? Because he was commander of the Pacific Fleet at the time, wasn't he, Ron?
No, he was commander of the Pacific Fleet. No, the Atlantic Fleet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I
out of
knew it
Europe.
was one or the other. So, I could not, I guess just my natural curiosity, and again, that thought that was in the back of my mind is, well, if they will allow a foreign country to blow an American ship out of the water and kill Americans, I'm not safe, because I mean nothing either in the master plan here, or neither do my fellow people at the agency. We all felt the same way. If this can happen to an American ship, well, they don't care about us as people. And I remember what popped into my head at that time was that famous quote by Henry Kissinger, the wonderful Jew. And he said, military men are just dumb, stupid animals fit only for American foreign policy. And that never left my mind, Phil. I thought about that the whole time. And then the thing that bothered me was the fact that we had 11 consecutive presidents, both Republican and Democrat, who had that, well, I can't use the language, but had that man either in their administration or as a top advisor. Now, if you were president of the United States and you carried about the American public, and a man had said that about the American fighting man, why would you ever trust your government again? And that was what led me to leave the No Such Agency, Phil, in a great part that and the USS Pueblo, which came on a little later. But we're concentrating on the Liberty, and that, but we can get to that if you would like to. But the thing that I got into and really started studying, especially because NSA also picked up the communications between Pacific Command, especially the USS America, the carrier. We picked up communications between them and McNamara, and also between LBJ.
Okay, let me stop you.
Go ahead.
Let me stop you a
buddy.
minute. Yeah,
Go ahead.
that's very interesting. I mean, that is really interesting. You pick up those calls, and they would have to figure, I know everybody's listening to this, that, they can do it. And what did McNamara and Johnson say?
Well, originally, I forgot, let's give the gentleman credit. What was the guy's name who strung the wires on the Liberty that allowed the signal to get out?
That was Terry Haldebardier, and he was very brave for doing that. He received the Silver Star for his heroic actions, and we only had one antenna. One he had taken offline. The other ones were all shot up within the first 3 seconds.
Well, that was intentional.
But, absolutely. I mean, they know exactly what they're doing. They reconned us, and for 2 days, and the attack started on the 8th. We got there on the 7th. But yeah, they know exactly who they were and what to hit. But Terry did get that out, within 25 minutes of the air attack, which lasted 25 minutes. I think he got it out about maybe 5-10 minutes during the attack, and then it went out to the Sixth Fleet. And I'll let you take it from there.
Well, Phil, I guess most people don't know that, and we'll get into this this whole thing called Operation Cyanide, and we'll get into that. But here is what was planned, and of course you guys know it, was to sink you guys to the bottom of the sea with no survivors. That's why they shot up the lifeboats. And of course, McNamara denied that when he was confronted with that. I've got a video of him denying it. He denied that and also an Israeli official, I was trying to look at his name, I think it was Amit, A-M-E-T, and he denied it as well, that they had ever shot up lifeboats. But you were there, and other people know, we heard it. But the thing of it is most people are unaware that this whole thing had been set in operation at least 2 years ahead of time. And there was a submarine that was involved, and I'm not sure if you were aware of that, but there was a submarine that was involved in that operation as well. And so there was a group that was known as the 303 Communications Group. And they were named that because that was the office number they were in. And the crazy thing about the 303 group was they're the one who put this whole Operation Cyanide into effect. But it gets real complicated when we really begin to look at it in all of its and lay it bare, Phil, which is what I hope we can do here, is the fact that LBJ was a psychopath. And I hope you don't mind at NSA, everybody, when they said, what does LB and LB Johnson stand for? We always said lying bastards. So that was our point, because we were aware, we knew what he had said when he had said, I don't care how many, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't care how many sailors are killed. We can't upset our allies, something to that effect. And that was said. We heard it because we're at the No Such Agency with an FLR-9 that was picking up communication from everywhere. So we knew that and knew that had happened. But then later, when we started looking at it, there was a gentleman that the A4s on the USS America that launched initially A4s with nuclear bombs to hit Cairo, because the whole operation meant that if you guys went down, we were going to nuke Cairo, because LBJ hated Nasser, and he hated the fact that Nasser had aligned himself with the Soviet Union. And so this was basically an operation to totally neutralize Egypt, but we were doing it for, I say we, I don't mean that possessively, but this country was doing that as a part of Operation Cyanide. That was going to give the casus belli the reason to go to war. And as you have said on your programs many times, Phil, had it not been for you guys surviving, we would have been in World War III. Because to have nuked Cairo with those A4s, which were on the way. But the A4s were called back when that gentleman that you mentioned was able to get out a signal. And so the A4s were called back with those nuclear assets, and they came back to the USS America. And then the captain of the USS America ordered the A4s to come to your aid. And McNamara at first said, no, recall. Well, being the patriots that they were, the people on the USS America said, hell no, we're not doing that. And then McNamara realized what was going on, and they had to be listening real time, Phil. They had to be. And so almost immediately they get the call from the commander-in-chief, the lying bastard Johnson. They get the call from him, and that's when he made that very callous comment. I don't care how many sailors die. We can't embarrass our allies here. So if we look at that 303 group, we can begin to piece things together. But I don't want to monopolize here, Phil. Something else you would like to ask, or before we jump into more?
Well, I've always felt that we were set up at least a year in advance, because they had this greater plan for Israel, get all the land they could. And there was a nuclear sub under us, not nuclear powered, but there was actually three of them: a Russian sub, USS Amberjack, and the USS Jackson, I believe.
Yes, Jackson. Correct.
Right. So what were they there for? To film the attack?
Well,
who knows?
Well, they were there, in my opinion, to back it up, and they had actually been sent there ahead of time. There was this operation, Phil, and I'm not sure if you ever heard of it, but have you ever heard of part of Operation Cyanide was called Frontlet, FRONTLET 615.
Oh, yeah. I've been aware of it for years. Absolutely. And the 303
Okay.
committee.
Right. All right. Well, the deal was that 615 represented June the 15th, and that was when the operation was supposed to happen. Well, suddenly, the one thing that most people are unaware of is how Johnson used his people and put them on multiple committees, especially his two favorites in the U.S. Supreme Court. And Abe Fortas, who had been his lawyer for multiple years, and who had actually engineered a fraudulent election in 1948 to make sure that LBJ got to be a senator. And so then Johnson rewards him, puts him on the Supreme Court. But he also, the thing that people are unaware of is the fact that he also had Goldberg to use to put into, and they were regular attendees of this 303 committee. And so the command, or the Operation Cyanide, came from that group. Well, it was supposed to actually happen on the 15th of June. You guys in the USS Liberty got there a little earlier than they anticipated. And so Johnson issues orders to both Goldberg and Fortas, and especially to Goldberg, do not accept any ceasefires. Now, Goldberg was assigned to the, the government agency. He was assigned there, and he was told, given orders, do not accept any peace negotiations between Israel and Egypt prior to 615. So they were in position to make sure that no peace was ever declared in the 6-Day War, so that it would facilitate Operation Cyanide. Go ahead, sir.
Well, when we left Africa in a hurry, we didn't know exactly where we were going until we got into road to Spain. But I think you're right. I think they got antsy and started the war too early. Is what they did. That's what I've always believed. But regardless what the motives were, they all turned out the same. 34 of my brothers were slaughtered and 174 others wounded. And, the mental strain they put on us and everything, and then setting us up to be slaughtered. I've heard one of my shipmates, his name was, doggone it. Anyway, Larry Weaver, he passed away here a little bit ago. A good guy. He was one of the most severely wounded too. He was bad off. I mean, he had more operations than you can imagine. But he said he thought maybe the USS Amberjack fired the torpedo that hit us. You think there's any credence in that?
I have no confirmation of that, Phil. That was something that had been discussed on several instances, but no confirmations. One of the things, being a historian and trying to keep up, the one thing I never want to do is to tell somebody something I can't back up with evidence. So for that reason, I'm not sure, but we had heard that theory as well. That maybe, but the point of it is they fully intended to take out your boilers because, had that occurred, it would have been immediately to the bottom very quickly. And that was the initial goal. If it was American, I can't, if it came from an American submarine, I cannot confirm that. But I cannot deny it as a plausibility. And I think that's something we have to look at. And the one thing I wanted to ask you was, were you ever aware, I can't think of his first name now, but a gentleman named Ingleton, who was with the
James Ingleton.
Yes. All right. He was part of that 303 committee too, along with Fortas and Goldberg. And the ironic thing about it was, Phil, and it always disturbed us all those almost 60 years ago, was the fact that this 303 committee could overrule the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And it was set up that way so that, the Joint Chiefs of Staff may have said, we're not going along with this. They had no choice. And it was really simple. And that was the scary part. That was one of the things that really bothered us. And I wanted to touch on, and I mentioned it to you yesterday, but this connection with Alan Blue. And you told me yesterday in a phone conversation that you were familiar with him and that the USS Liberty had picked him up en route to Spain. Is that correct?
Yeah, we picked up Alan Blue and 3 Marines. 2 of them were blown to bits. One survived, Bryce Lightwood, and I think there was another, either CIA or NSA guy they picked up, civilian. But Alan Blue was a civilian. NSA analyst, I believe.
Right. And I'm not sure exactly what he knew, exactly how he was involved in this, but I do know that he got a phone call 2 o'clock in the morning one morning, and he was told by his NSA Dernza, director of the NSA, he directly phone call, and he was told, you're leaving in the morning and you're headed for Spain, and you will go aboard the USS Liberty. Now, no reason, as I can discern, was ever given to him for doing that, but I have often wondered, to the best of my knowledge, he was killed in the attack, and he has been, I confirmed that yesterday after our conversation. He was buried at Arlington. But the crazy thing about it is that for several weeks afterwards, his wife was actually had NSA operatives with her almost 24 hours a day to make sure she didn't say anything. So my question
Pat
has
Blue.
always been, what did she know that they were afraid would get out?
There's no telling. I mean, who knows? She has come to several of our reunions, a very nice lady, and she is since remarried, but I guess that was pretty hard for her. Who can imagine what she had to go through, getting that noise and listen to their people saying, "Hey, your husband's dead." That's not good information.
Absolutely.
I felt sorry for her. All of them, all the families and everything, but what's going on and why does it happen? And I think everybody knows our government is controlled. It's controlled from the very bottom to the very top.
Well, Phil, if I could relate one quick story, I was back living in Colorado, and it was around the year 2000 and up until 2006. Well, actually, I was there from 1996 to 2006. But I had a gentleman who came to some of my constitutional lectures who was running for Congress, and his name was Scott Tipton, and he was from Cortez, Colorado, and he was running for Congress, and he won. And so one of the things I knew, the gentleman that he put in charge of his staff in Colorado, and I got to know him real well. And so we were talking one day, and just shortly after the congressman had been into the office of Congress, he came to me, and we were talking one day at a restaurant. We had lunch together, and he had been a sniper in the Marine Corps, so we had some mutual occurrences. And so he said, "This is really weird." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, did you know that shortly after new members of Congress are sworn in, they are given a free 11-day trip to Israel? They can take members of their family or certain members of their staff." And he said, "The thing that disturbs me is the fact that this is the only country that's allowed to do that. Why?"
Well, I know you talk about Scott Tipton. I wrote him about the USS Liberty and got the same thing back as everybody else I've written in Colorado and in the Senate and the Congress, that they don't want nothing to do with it. They just don't. And they give you a form letter back like you don't know what you're talking about. And it's just disgusting. I mean, none of them will help. Lauren Boebert, she was my congressman, and then she moved to another district.
Right.
But her aide told me she will never, ever, ever help the USS Liberty, no matter what.
No, and she's also a supporter of the log cabin Republicans, if you're familiar with who they are.
I am.
All right. So she supports the homosexuals in the Republican Party. Why? And she did. Right. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Phil.
There's so many crazy things going on in this world, and it's been that way for a long time, but it sounds like, and it always has been since I've been alive, if you do anything, you have to go through Israel. And
well, it seems to be true. Certainly. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt, sir.
No, that's fine. I just find it crazy that they could get so many people to do that. But is it blackmail? Is it greed? Is it money? Is it power? Or all of them? But they get a hold of them.
Being a student of history, I've brought this up on multiple occasions. And my question has been, and I've put it in several of my presentations and several of my articles that I have written, is when was the first influence of America by the Jewish cabal? Well, we can go all the way back to what we call the founding of America. Alexander Hamilton was Jewish. And obviously, if you study your history, especially you study your letters during that founding era time, which is critical, because back then they didn't have emails, they didn't have text messages, they didn't have any way of communicating except in written correspondence. And it is obvious from the very beginning that Alexander Hamilton had George Washington by the short and curlies. And you wonder why that it happened all the way back then. And then you realize that after the Constitution was drafted and after the government was accepted in 1789, the first two moves were made by Alexander Hamilton, which was the Judicial Act of 1789, which gave control of this country to the Supreme Court, unelected lawyers serving for life. Well, there's nothing about that that indicates freedom. And then the next thing that was sponsored was the U.S. Bank, which is very similar to the Federal Reserve today. Now, Washington was questioned on multiple occasions by Thomas Jefferson, who was Secretary of the State. Why are you allowing this? Why are you allowing this man to do things? And he actually sent Washington a letter, which I have a copy of, asking him 24 questions. Why are you allowing this man to run the government? Why are you allowing him to propose as Secretary of Treasury? Why are you allowing him to propose bills before Congress? It shouldn't be done. And most people who are unaware of history, because it's not taught to us, obviously, for a reason, most people are unaware that Thomas Jefferson actually resigned his position because of Alexander Hamilton. And of course, we know that Hamilton was killed 1804 in a duel with Aaron Burr. And I've told people many times the big problem with America was Burr didn't do that 20 years before. And we also know by lineage that Abraham Lincoln was Jewish. And we look at, we've got Abraham Lincoln, and what did he do? He gave us the first income tax, and he gave us, created the IRS, which comports exactly with the second plank of the Communist Manifesto. And Lincoln and Marx were penmates. They wrote letters back and forth to each other. And we know that when it comes all the way, jump forward to FDR, there were at least 130 different Soviets who were in FDR's cabinet, including the man who came up with Operation Snow, which was the attack on Pearl Harbor. And, we don't know history, Phil, and in many ways, and we haven't been taught it. It's not because we don't know it. It's because it hasn't been put out there for us to study. But this is a deep rabbit hole. It is not something that just happened, although as horrendous as it was with what happened to you guys, that is just another nail in the wall of what has been going on for centuries in this country.
Well, Vietnam's a good example. They wanted war. They wanted the bankers make money. And the young men that went over there and fought and died were none but pawns. And that's pretty bad. Johnson said to his generals, you want a war, now you got your war, about Vietnam. And so that's what the government does. That's what they've been doing. But going forward with the USS Liberty, we're starting to get people to realize that we're not a bunch of nuts or anything, or we're not out here to destroy our country. We're out here to make our country better, because the truth about the USS Liberty and who did it and how it was planned, executed, and covered up is one of the most ungodly things I've ever thought I'd be involved in my life, to see what they've done and what they will do. Hey, I saw them kill my shipmates. Those guys were young men. You don't forget that. That's why I do this show. You don't forget that. And to act like we're Jew haters and Nazis, we're not. We're red-blooded Americans that served our country honorably and with distinction. We're the most decorated ship in naval history since World War II for a single engagement. Medal of Honor, Navy Crosses, Silver Stars, Bronze Star with a V for Valor, Combat Action, Navy E. That's what we were awarded, plus the Presidential Unit Citation by guess who? Johnson. That thing didn't mean anything to me. He's the man that set me up to be slaughtered and murdered, never to have a family, never to live my life. I was only 20 years old, just like most of us aboard the Liberty. And those guys that are still alive and deserve the respect of the American people. All we want to do is get in front of Congress, but they won't do it. They will not do it. They say there have been 5 investigations. There have never been one. If you write a letter to Congress, be prepared to be lied to. As Joe Matters would always say, be prepared to be lied to, because that's what's going to happen. So it's going to take the people, the podcasts like this, Candace Owens and Jake Shields and Jimmy Dore, and there's so many other ones. Owen Schroyer. I mean, come on. We're all in this boat together, and we're going to try to write it up. Oh, that's Staying Afloat. That's a book I'm writing right now, Staying Afloat. That's all I've done all my life is to try to stay afloat. And we're still here, and we're still fighting. But you see anything going forward, Mike, that is going to be a positive thing for not just the USS Liberty, but America?
Well, Phil, I wish I could. And first, let me preface this by saying I have the highest admiration for you gentlemen, because a great majority of Americans who do not have the inner core that you, Ron Kukl, and so many others had, so many people would have said, look what they did to us. The best thing for us to do is just shut up and go in a shell and just try to live our lives from this place forward. But you and others cannot do that, Phil. It's not in your makeup. You are true American heroes. You will not allow your shipmates to be forgotten. And that is, to me, is the very core of America. If we don't have more people like that, we don't have a chance. Because, and I'm sure, congressional committees, yeah, my backside. They've never done a full investigation into the USS Liberty because they know what it would bring forth. And, initially, the Israelis didn't even want to commit any funds, and they said it was a mistake. Well, if it was a mistake, who got punished for that mistake? In the military, in the U.S. military, you make a gross blunder, something happens to you. What happened to all the people in Israel who were behind this? Did anything ever happen to them? Well, we made a mistake. We killed 34 people and we blew up a ship. Oh, we're sorry. Here's some money. But did they ever admit the truth? And they knew the truth. No. Have you ever seen any of those Israeli pilots interviewed publicly? No. Why? They didn't want that news to come out, Phil. They couldn't allow that news to come out. But what you guys have done, to me, is the epitome of the core of America. You are not going to allow something, no matter how many people form against you, and you guys have gone through hell for 58 years, not even counting the attack. Everything that you have endured for 58 years is absolutely wrong, and it shouldn't be done to any American who stands for what this country claims they stand for. And it just bothers me to my core that this is allowed to happen. It does. That's one of the reasons I have asked you, Ron Kukl, God rest his soul, and others to come onto my radio program so that we can talk about this. Because this right here, we can't allow this to die. We can't allow the memory of what you guys have stood for well over half a century. We can't allow that to just simply fade away into history. It can't be done, because to do it is to accept the lie, and we can't accept the lie, my opinion.
We do need to be remembered for all the right reasons, and that's it. That's all we want is justice, and I think it'll help America a lot to find out the real truth. And I'm going to keep on doing it till I can't. And my other shipmates, of course, Mo Schaefer, he was just on a while back, and
great interview.
Yeah, Mo's a good guy. All of them are, Mickey and Larry Bowen, and just good people. Merlin Miller. But they're not bad people. They just want the truth like we do. In fact, Larry and I co-authored a letter. He was president then of the Liberty Veterans Association. And they didn't answer it the first time, and that was in 2016.
Did we freeze up there? What happened?
He wouldn't answer back, but we did get a form letter back, or Larry did, which I've got, and it doesn't address anything we asked him in the letter. Nothing. It's just a form letter saying, "Thank you for your service. We love veterans." That was it.
Yeah.
So the USS Liberty, as far as getting in front of Congress, I'm sure that'll never happen, not unless a miracle happens. But the American people are waking up. All these people that stand for genocide or murdering Americans on the high seas or taking our money. We're beholden to a government that owns our country. And that can't go on. It must not go on.
I'm sorry, sir. But the thing that means so much to me is when I look at people like you, Ron Kukl, people I have actually come in contact with. The thing I know, and the thing that goes right to my very core of being, is the fact, Phil, you're not doing this for you. Ron didn't do it for him. You did it for those brave men who perished on that day and who have died since. You're not trying to put a crown on your head and be king or anything else. You're doing it for those people. And at whatever point you're ready here, I would really like to get into what I did after I left the No Such Agency, which also, in my mind, correlates to what is going on here today. And that was my tenure with the American Foundation for the Accountability of Prisoners of War and Missing in Action, all military personnel. So at your leisure, when you're ready to approach that subject, let's do so if you don't mind.
I think we should go ahead and do it now. And yeah, this is going to be interesting. Thanks, Mike.
Oh, certainly, sir. And so after I left, I contacted some old associates and I said, look, I can't do this NSA thing anymore. I can't do it because now the alleged enemy of America is Americans and the military. And I can't be a part of that. I just absolutely cannot. And so I had a good friend who said, well, would you like to come to work for us? You're already in the D.C. area. Would you like to come to work for us? And I said, well, what are you doing? And he said, well, we've formed an organization called the American Foundation for Accountability of Prisoners of War and Missing in Action. We have to do something about this. We cannot continue to allow this government to leave our brave military personnel in the hands of their enemy to be tortured, used for medical experiments, and eventually just killed off. We can't allow that to continue to happen. And they said, we know that you are a researcher, so we'd like to bring you in and also have you travel around the country and make presentations to people. And I said, here, twist my arm. I can't wait to do that. And so they hired me first as a consultant, in many respects. But then in later years, I was elected vice president of the organization, something I'm very, very proud of. But I started doing my research, and I found out that starting in World War I, we left American military personnel in the hands of the Russians. And so we traded them some medical supplies when they were having problems. We got some of them back, but we didn't get them all. And Phil, the thing that is just really scary when we look at the numbers of what happened with the Liberty and what happened with the Pueblo, that is scary to me. It's petrifying. But when I stop and think that starting in with World War I all the way through the wars in the Middle East, this country has left over 80,000 military personnel in the hands of their enemy. And they not only left them there, which is a serious crime, they lied to cover it up. And that is one of the things that just absolutely makes me so angry that it's hard to understand. And it became real personal to me because while with the American Foundation for Accountability of Prisoners of War and Missing in Action, I met my wife because her brother had been shot down over North Vietnam, 1972. Lyle Weasel had been shot down, and then the family had been lied to for years about what happened to him. And just one of those crazy things, Ron, in Grand Junction, Colorado, I met a gentleman, a Navy personnel, who had worked on rescue and recovery in the Gulf of Tonkin during Vietnam. And he had actually been dispatched in what the Navy called a Big Mother, which, the Air Force and the Army called, the Jolly Green Giant. And he had actually been on the recovery mission. And he, one of the great things for me was to be able to give a presentation in Grand Junction, Colorado many years ago. And I gave that presentation. And at that presentation, this gentleman showed up. He had written a book called The Big Mothers about their rescue attempt of American downed pilots and personnel in that area. And he had dedicated that book to my wife's brother and to his pilot, Tommy Zorn of Georgia. He dedicated that book to him. And he told us and sat and talked with my wife, which was so much because it gave her closure after 30 years. He said, what happened to your brother and what happened to the pilot was the canopy did not eject. And when they hit the eject after they had been hit by a SAM missile, after they hit the button, they were thrown into the canopy and their necks were broken. And he said, unfortunately, we came under fire and we were not able to rescue those bodies. But for 30 years, the government, my mother-in-law and my father-in-law, Phil, died, never knowing what happened to their son when the government knew it all along. And just a few weeks before we met this gentleman in Grand Junction, the U.S. government had sent a petition for my wife for a DNA sample. We may have found your brother's remains, which was just a continuation of the lie. They knew what happened because I asked this gentleman, this Navy personnel who was involved in rescue and recovery, I asked him straight up front, and I'm not going to give you his name or anybody else because I don't want anybody to come after him. But he said, unequivocally, he said, yes, we had the tail number on that F4. We sent that in an official report, and we told them. So the U.S. government had known for 30 years what had happened to my wife's brother, and they kept lying. Why? And then my years in D.C. being involved in this POW MIA issue, and then finally coming to realize that Eisenhower had been approached by George Patton on a railroad platform. And Patton had said to him, look, Ike, this is unacceptable. We cannot allow the Russians to come through, free 20-some thousand American POWs, put them on a troop train and take them to Siberia. We cannot allow this to happen. And he said, look, Ike, if you don't do something about it, I will. A week later, Patton's dead. Who's been running our country all this time? We look at the 8,000 from Korea that were never accounted for. We look at the ones from Vietnam who were never accounted for. And then Ronald Reagan, that great Republican, comes into office campaigning in 1980. Well, my first priority is going to be accounting for these POWs and MIAs, which was a lie. He never did anything except try to cover it up because he formed a Senate committee of John McCain, who was an abject traitor, and John Kerry, and put them in charge of this POW committee. And they shut down everything. I was at several of those meetings in person, Phil. I saw what they did to especially one family of a pilot from New Mexico. He was an Air Force pilot, Major Apodaca. And at one of the meetings we had before this Senate committee on POWs and MIAs, he had 5 sisters. And one of them stood up at that meeting and said, look, we have heard that this information is available, and why are you not doing it? And I listened to John McCain himself say, well, if I couldn't have survived this captivity, nobody else could have. I saw these Apodaca sisters. Of course, they had different names then. They were married, different last names. But they were in tears. And all investigations into the POW MIA situation were shut down by that committee. We saw it happen. And to look back at World War II and see what happened to Patton about that same issue, and then to know that we had, those ones from Korea and, the ones from Vietnam and all the other stuff. Phil, you and I both know if this government cares nothing for its military personnel, it cares nothing for the people. I better shut up. I get too emotional with this issue.
No, hey, listen, that's what it's all about, trying to get answers and trying to be faithful to the men out there that had to go through that. And all those wars were fought for money and power and control. In World War II, when it started with Pearl Harbor, I understood there were radio men up on the hills and stuff, and they knew where they were coming. And do you know anything about that?
Oh, yes. There's no doubt about that. There is a gentleman, I think his name was Bamford. He was actually a Navy veteran, and he wrote a book about that. And he had done exhaustive study over years. And we go back to the very same plot that was involved with you folks. We go back to Operation Snow that was also concocted to bring America into war, into World War II. And so they fabricated and allowed the attack on Pearl Harbor. So when are we ever going to learn that in a country where the government doesn't care one hoot in hell about its veterans, how could it ever be trusted, Phil?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that trust can ever be, bought back, or it's too amazing for me to even think about the crazy things that go on in government, and we're just the pawns of the whole deal, the whole scheme, and it's been that way. And so many lives were lost because of it. I'm afraid right now that there's going to be some kind of war going with the United States and Iran. That's exactly what Israel wants us to fight their wars, and they'll probably get their way. Your thoughts on that, Mike?
Here's the thing, and you tell people this and they look at you like you've lost your mind. Has there been a war since World War II, and including World War II, that wasn't started on a lie? We know that they were started on lies. We know the Gulf of Tonkin incident was a lie, because most people don't know that when they came out with those, what would they call them, whitewater tape? No, not whitewater, but anyway, when they came out with those tapes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something about the Gulf of Tonkin. I went back in the Navy, and guess what ship I ended up on? The USS Maddox. DD
My
731.
goodness.
Yeah, I went aboard there. There were still guys that knew the truth that were on that cruise. They said it was all bullshit. Nothing like that happened. So that was all. That was all a ruse. A
Oh, yes.
ruse to get us into a war. And Johnson was president then. He wanted that big time. Also, Captain Booker, he said that if he'd have known about the USS Liberty and what they did, his ship would have never been captured. He wouldn't have done it.
Exactly.
Yeah, Captain Booker, he wrote a good book too. But he kind of got the shaft, and like our captain, he got the Medal of Honor, which he deserved wholeheartedly. He really did. I mean, he was a brave man. I saw him in action, as all the crew were. But he got a brand new ship, Medal of Honor, which wasn't presented at the White House, but at the Navy Yard, and he pretty much kept his mouth shut. But he knew the real deal, and I knew the type of pressure we were under. Can you imagine what they put him under?
No doubt. And didn't he finally, knowing that his days on this earth were numbered, 97 at your reunion, did he not open up?
He did open up. Yes, absolutely did. And George Golden, he knew the captain real good. They were. I mean, that was his engineering officer, the Captain
Right.
McGonagall's engineering officer, and he broke down and told him. And George said he was crying that he sold us out. But I mean, what else? I don't think he had a choice, but because they'd have crucified him like they tried to do to Booker.
Oh, yes.
So just like him saying there was a round that went off on the 50 caliber. I don't believe that, because two of my buddies were blown to bits up there, and that 50 cal didn't work. I think that was just bullshit myself. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. Or maybe it was one of the gun mounts that were cooking off. Who knows? I don't think we ever fired at anybody. It didn't make any difference anyway. One bullet wouldn't do anything, but does it really matter, one bullet or no bullets? I think it does matter, because the captain said, well, maybe they thought we were firing on them or something. Well, we had every right to fire on them if that machine gun would have worked. But the two men were in that gun tower blown to bits by an Israeli rocket, turned them into mush. Friends of
Well,
mine.
Phil, here's a question that I've always asked about the USS Liberty. Considering the equipment, the top secret equipment, and the top secret people who had the top secret crypto clearance like I did, who were on your ship, why would you send that ship out unprotected with all of that deciphering equipment, with all of the stuff that was there, if you didn't know it was going to be sunk to the bottom of the sea? You certainly would not have sent it out there without some kind of protection. And they didn't do that. And to me, that is, I don't know, how do you explain that, Phil?
Well, Captain McGonigal, he asked for a destroyer escort. He was denied. Commander David Lewis did the same thing, requested a destroyer escort or some kind of craft to come with us. We're all alone. We're in a war zone. But we were in international waters, and he was denied. So, yeah, we were set up. I mean, so set up. And, I mean, you got a 2-hour attack with the airplanes, 40 or 25 minutes, and an hour and a half of the torpedo boats. And we beat them with our will and our wits to live. We defeated the mighty IDF and didn't fire a shot. And we got them. They couldn't sink us to the bottom by the grace of God. He held that ship up. I guarantee you that's the only way we got out of that, by divine intervention. And I think everybody aboard that ship believes that. I know I sure as hell do. It's just, and then to be snubbed by your government, tell you never talk about it or you go to prison or worse, it messed a lot of people's minds up. I didn't talk about it for 18 years until I met my second wife, and I read an article by Stan White in the newspaper, and he was a Master Chief Petty Officer. He was a spy, NSA. And when I read that, I felt like the whole world come off my shoulders, because I wanted to talk about it, and I haven't shut up since. That's been 42 years ago.
Thank God for that.
Well, thank you for that, Mike. We get into, where our country's going now, and we talked about that a little bit earlier, but we need to change. And I think it's going to be on social media. You can't believe anything out of the news. You can't believe anything out of the White House. You can't believe anything out of your congressman. And they can't even come together on a budget. I mean, who's running our country, man? I mean, they're spending all our money, giving it away to Israel. They just get anything they want. During the well, the shutdown is still going on now. I believe President Trump said, keep giving the money to Israel. And all these other federal workers aren't getting paid. And that's, hey, these people live paycheck to paycheck. I'm sure a lot of them do, especially living in D.C. That's an expensive place to live.
Very expensive.
Yeah. But who is running our government? I think and I think everybody else knows too.
Well, we should, but the one thing, again, Phil, and not to be redundant, but you and your shipmates epitomize the original spirit of America. You guys are examples of why this country exists, starting in all the way back to 1765, when Patrick Henry made to the Virginia Burgesses when he said, no, we're not going along with this Stamp Act. We're not going to do it. And here's why we're not going to do it. You guys are the lineage of Patrick Henry and the people who stood for America way back then and said, not no, but hell no. We will not accept this. And you guys keep doing that every day that you possibly can. No matter what they throw at you, you keep doing it. And I was trying to think of the gentleman's name that I got to know who was a POW. He was a colonel in the Air Force, and he was a POW. He was actually the senior ranking officer at the Hanoi Hilton. And I used to actually, when I lived in Arizona, I would go to Ravenswood Golf Course. Now, I never liked golf because, like my grandpa said, it was cow pasture pool. But I never cared for it. But I used to go with him and, in essence, kind of be his caddy just so I could listen to him and what he had to say, because he had been, as I said, the senior ranking officer at the Hanoi Hilton. Nobody hated John McCain worse than he did. He told me on multiple occasions, McCain sold out. He sold out early. They treated him, they said, in the POW camps, we called him the Little Prince because his father was in command of the Pacific Fleet, and the North Vietnamese knew this, and so they catered to him. And he told me on multiple occasions, he's the guy, Phil, and I'll be happy to send him to you, who sent me 2 pictures. Now, I'm going way back to the 90s here. He sent me 2 pictures. One was John McCain hugging Colonel Bui Tien of the North Vietnamese Army. And this gentleman told me that SOB tortured more Americans to death than anybody. And he asked me this question: what the hell is McCain doing hugging that SOB? Then he sent me another picture, and most Americans are not aware of this. Did you know that the North Vietnamese put a monument up to John McCain in Hanoi? Why?
They called him the Songbird.
Yes.
In San Diego, when he was running for president, I had been there the day before, and I already had an airplane going back, but he was having a rally in San Diego. And a friend of mine, James Morris, good guy, real smart guy. And we were talking on the phone, and he says, hey, I'll go down there. And he did, and he got right in front. And he yelled out to John McCain, what about the USS Liberty? What about the USS Liberty? And McCain says, you jerk, you jerk. And they escorted him out very swiftly. They got rid of him for asking about the USS Liberty. I mean, all these crooked politicians and what they do, and like his daddy's the one that, was in charge of the cover up aboard the USS Liberty. John McCain. So,
yes. And the one thing I'll never forget, Phil, and I thank you for allowing me a voice to say this, was back then when I was with the American Foundation for Accountability in Prisoners of War, we were approached by several nurses who had served in Vietnam. Now, most people are unaware. I did a special program for them a couple of years ago, the 11 women who died in Vietnam. Most people have never even thought of that. But 11 nurses died in Vietnam. Their names are on the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. But we were approached by several ladies who were at that time, again, I'm talking about the 1980s, who approached us and said, why isn't there a monument or at least a mention of the women who served in Vietnam? And so they said, would you help us try to get a monument or at least an understanding of what these women did? And we said, you got it. So one of the things we did was we went to the Cannon office building and started going through to members of Congress. And this was 87, 88. And we started talking to members of Congress about let's authorize at least a monument to the women who served in Vietnam. Yes, their names are on the wall, but there is no mention of what they did or the effort that they gave. And we were traveling around, and we went to McCain's office. And Ron, I'll never forget that SOB's comment when we went in and we actually got to talk to him, and we said, we would like to have you as a former POW to endorse a monument for the women who were involved. And guess what his comment was? A monument for the women? The next damn thing you people will want is a monument for the dogs. That was the character of the person we were dealing with. And a lot of people don't know that when he ran for president, there was a internet group called Veterans Against John McCain. A lot of people knew about this, and they knew the stories about him. Now, the colonel that I was telling you about earlier told me that the Vietnamese provided him with women. He actually had children while he was under captivity, and he never was involved in any kind of torture whatsoever. And that he actually made presentations with Hanoi, with what was her name, the lady who did the propaganda?
Jane Fonda.
No, I'm talking about the Vietnamese lady.
Yeah.
Jane Fonda did it as well. But the Vietnamese lady, what did they call her? Hanoi something.
I forget.
But he did programs with her. And this man, I feel so bad. I can't remember his name right now. He was such a wonderful person. And he told me so much. I sat and talked with him when he was playing golf. He loved golf, and he was at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. And I spent time with him, and just absolutely. And he told me a story. He said that when they first returned with Operation Homecoming, 1973, he said that he and Colonel Ted Guy and a couple of other guys went to Nixon and Kissinger and said, we want to prefer charges against John McCain for corroborating with the enemies. And they were told at that time by both Nixon and Kissinger, no, we're not going to do that. America needs to heal. America needs to understand. And a lot of people also don't understand that during the time that he was a POW, John McCain's wife at the time campaigned heavily all over the place, working as hard as she could to have the truth brought out about POWs. Unfortunately, she was involved in an automobile accident and was paralyzed from the waist down. When McCain came home in 73, within a few short months, he divorced her and married the lady whose father was the head of the Budweiser distributorship in Arizona. And then we saw the meteoric rise of his political career. Phil, this government has been corrupt, I believe, since the beginning, since 1787 when that Constitution was adopted. I totally believe it's been corrupt because Hamilton was involved. We've had everybody else. We asked people, oh, your Constitution is wonderful. How come it didn't stop Lincoln and all of his atrocities against the people of the South? I'm talking about civilians, not military personnel, but civilians. And I don't know why it is, Phil. I just can't understand, but Americans just can't seem to grasp this whole situation. I mean, USS Liberty to me is the cherry on the top of the sundae, proving that this government doesn't give a damn about the people. It's about money and power, and they don't care. They truly do not care. And if we don't wake up to this, and you are one of the major contributors of why we must stay awake and stay aware of what's going on. And that is why I care so much for what you guys are doing, because you're carrying the torch of freedom.
Well, thank you for that, Mike. I really appreciate it. I know my shipmates will too. And this has been a great discussion. I've really enjoyed it. You're full of knowledge and you're very reputable and you know what you're talking about. And, that's about as good as it gets, man. You're an A1 type guy. I really appreciate it. Why don't you tell everybody about your radio shows?
Well, thank you, Phil. I do several efforts. One of the things I did when I was with the No Such Agency was I was tasked with going into the National Archives and Library of Congress and researching documents. Well, I have always been kind of a historian at heart. So I was even researching documents back then that had nothing to do with my position at NSA at the time. And when I would see these documents, I would realize that those documents were totally 180 degrees out of phase with what I had been taught in high school and college. So I started making copies of them, and I copied documents for several years. Now, those are copies of original documents. They are not the original documents, and they are so stamped. They're stamped as an original copy. Well, I did it at the Library of Congress, the National Archives, and I also had a tenure, a very short tenure, just as a substitute to stand in 1987 at the University of Virginia. And so I had access to the rotunda. And so I copied a lot of documents there. And most people are probably totally unaware, I'm sure they are. Thomas Jefferson, either wrote or received over 13,000 letters. Well, in those letters are history. And in the documents that I was able to procure at the National Archives and Library of Congress. Now, how many people know that just recently the government shut down the National Archives? Why? Because they don't want people to know the truth. It's very, very simple. But I collected all these documents. And so I put those documents out in my Substack, which is michaelgaddy.substack.com. I put them out there because I want to share them, because my grandfather told me when I was young, knowledge not shared is knowledge lost. And I don't want this knowledge to be lost, just like you don't want the memory of the USS Liberty and your shipmates to be lost. So I do that, and then I have 2 programs on RBN, and man, I can't thank you enough for the times that you and Ron Kukul have come onto those programs. It just means the world to me. But Republic Broadcasting Network, or republicbroadcastingnetwork.org, you can go there. You can find, the shows that we have done, including the shows we've done with you and with Ron. And I have those. And then on Sundays, I have a 1-hour program called the Rebel and the Renegade Roundtable, of where we try to introduce the truths of history as reference to the misnamed Civil War. Well, thank you for the opportunity to do that. And I've got people who send me emails and what have you constantly. And I just got one just 10 minutes ago as we were talking. When are you going to have Phil back on your program? So I don't know. You'll have to answer that, buddy.
Oh, anytime you ask, I'll be there.
I appreciate that. That means so much to me, Phil.
Well, thank you, Mike. It's been an enjoyable conversation. Learned a lot, and I hope America's learned a lot too. And it's all about the red, white, and blue. No other flag, just America. It's always America first. It's got to be America first, none other. I don't care who it is. Israel, Spain, anybody. America first. Get all our servicemen back home. They don't be in all these countries being sitting ducks. I mean, it's like, what are we going to change? Why we got bases there? Is it national security? I'm not sure. Anyway, Thanks again. I appreciate it, Mike, and we'll be talking to you.